Hey, what's new and exciting? It's Kevin O'Shaughnessy, and today I'm doing something a little different. I don't usually do this, but I've got a little bit of a rant for you today. Now, before we get into that, there's a very old joke. It was a joke that I learned when I was learning how to play guitar. You've probably heard it yourself, and it goes something like this. How do you get a guitar player to stop playing? The answer: put a piece of sheet music in front of him. Very funny, right? So obviously it implies that guitar players can't read music, and you could say by extension, they probably don't know their theory either, all right? Now, this is where the crux of my rant comes into play. Now, to be clear, I'm not going after any guitar students at this point. This is for guitar teachers, so if any of you are listening, listen close. In this time of pandemic, I have seen a rash of instructors putting out guitar courses. This is very cool. No problem with this whatsoever. I've even toyed around with the idea myself. If you want to see a guitar course from me, let me know in the comments below and let me know what you're having trouble with, and I'll see about putting one together. But getting back to the rant. In the last week or so alone, I've seen ads from 4 different guitar teachers about 4 different aspects of playing the guitar. I think one was on the basics of guitar, one was specifically on strumming, and another one was on improvising, and I forget what the 4th one was. But they all have one thing in common, and that one thing is they all boast that you can learn the whole of the subject that they are teaching without having to learn any, and I quote, boring music theory. This is where I have my problem. First of all, for you guitar teachers out there who are using this ploy to get new students, shame on you. Now, I kind of get it. There's probably an assumption out there that most people, particularly guitar players, think that music theory is boring. Okay, fine. Maybe you're trying to relate to them on that level, but you're the teacher. So stop it, right? You're cutting off a vital resource for students to get to know the music they're learning how to play so much better than they know it. Why are you doing that? Okay, well, I have a couple of reasons, okay? I'm not just completely pissed off about this whole thing. I have given this quite a bit of thought. And I can imagine that, first of all, you probably know your theory. Otherwise, how would you be able to advertise to students that they don't need to learn any of this boring theory? You probably know it. At the very least, you were probably exposed to it, even if you didn't take the time to memorize all of it. And maybe you found it boring. In which case, shame on your teachers, because they should have made that, if not more exciting, at least more relevant to you. So if as a teacher you don't see the value of music theory, well, then there's a little bit of a problem there, okay? And that's something that I think you need to look at. Now, if your teacher didn't make it interesting for you, then okay, it's not entirely your fault. But you are in a position now to try to make it more relevant and interesting or even exciting for your students. You need to get creative with that. Otherwise, like I said, you're cutting your students off from a huge exploration of the music they're learning to play. Now, for both the teachers and the students out there, again, I think I get it. Music theory over the years is generally presented as something along the lines of the rules of music, right? This is something that we have to follow, right? You follow the rules. And that's bullshit. Basically, the theory always follows the music. So how is music theory created? Well, let me blast this misconception out of the water right now. What happens is somebody writes a piece of music. Somebody listens to that piece of music and says, wow, that's freaking cool. How does that work? And then they go and they dissect that piece of music and they come up with what they think are the tendencies that make that music cool. That's the whole point of music theory. It answers the question, why is this music so cool? Like, why wouldn't you want to know that about the songs you're playing? Does that make sense? That's what we're trying to get to with music theory. But the theory doesn't come before the music. The music comes first. Then people look at it and they say, oh, wow, yeah, these writers use these tendencies and these writers use these tendencies. And that's really all they are. They're tendencies, not rules. Of course, there are some things. There are acoustical principles of music that are rules. I mean, we're talking about physics here, so you're not really going to be able to change that. But as far as how people write their music, there really is no rules. There are no rules in making music. You can do whatever you want. But if, for example, you want to write a song in the style of, insert the name of your favorite artist here, they're going to have certain tendencies. There are going to be certain chord progressions that they follow, that they enjoy. There are going to be certain types of melodies that they use more often than not. If you can identify them, then you can write a piece of music like that, and it's going to sound like artist X. If you have no interest in writing music whatsoever, but you want to be able to play covers by your favorite artists, then understanding how the song was put together also will help you create more engaging covers, right? You'll be able to take it apart and understand why the artist did a particular thing here. Why did they play it like this? Why didn't they play it like that? You'll have a better understanding of it. Then you can choose, because it's your cover. Do you want to emulate what the artist did, or do you want to flip it upside down a little bit? And you'll have some tools to do that if you know the theory. Now, another misconception about music theory is that it's hard, that it's boring. To this, well, there is some of it. The theory of 20th century classical music, for example, will make your head spin. It is really complex. It's really hard. And it's just nuts what some of these people were trying to do. But for the most part, and actually now that I think about it, like if you're into like heavy jazz, if you're into bebop or something like that, yes, there's some theory there that's pretty complicated. But by and large, and I think I mean it this time, by and large, the theory that most guitar students need to be able to understand the songs that they're playing better, or perhaps write their own, is actually very simple. And it's easy to learn, it's easy to adapt, if you're taught the right way. And this is the problem with a lot of the theory that is out there. It's taught backwards. That's it, backwards. But they can get away with it, and here's why. I think that it is generally assumed that music theory is only for those people who want to become professionals, right? You need to have some theory if you're going to be a professional. But even that is skewed a little bit, because there's a difference between a creative artist and an interpretive artist. Now, if you're going to be a creative artist, the theory helps. Do you need it? Not necessarily. If your imagination is vast and you can put the sounds together in a way that you have a good intuition about and it makes sense, then no, you don't really need to learn the theory. This is true. If, however, you're more of an interpretive musician, this is somebody who's putting together covers, or they're playing in pit bands for musicals or doing session work or something like that, then yeah, theory is actually really important, because you've got to be able to dig into the piece so that you can play it to the best of your ability and get a specific intention out. So it's not just for professionals, but it does have something to do with what kind of musician you are looking to be. Now, if you do want to be a creative musician, like I said, you don't necessarily need the theory, but I will tell you that having a knowledge of some of the basic theory is some of the best problem-solving information you can possibly have. It is one of those things where you get stuck, you're trying to work out a transition. If you know a little theory, you can get your way out of that and have that section work the way you want it to work. But let's get back to the idea of theory being taught backwards. Because there is this assumption, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that theory is for professionals, then they can teach it pretty much however they want. And the way theory is usually taught has to do with the idea of starting from the building blocks. So you start with pitch, you start with duration, right? And you combine patterns of duration together, you get rhythms. And that moves on to things like time signatures, and you start getting into this stuff, this very microscopic element of music, right? This is where you start, the smallest nugget of music that you can have. That's where most music theory courses start. But that's not how the average listener hears music theory. Now, if you're going into a college program, they can hit you with this microscopic version of music theory because you just have to learn it. That's just the way it is, right? You want to graduate, you got to know this stuff, and they don't need to make it exciting. They don't need to make it fun. They don't need to make it relevant. You have the responsibility of learning it. But if you're not planning on going into music professionally, or you're planning on going into things like, pop music or rock or blues or something like that, the amount of music theory that you need to know is much smaller. And I have found in my own experience that the best way to teach it is from the large things. What are the things that we hear first? We hear the form of the song, right? So even just understanding that there are different song forms, there are logical patterns to the way songs are structured, is a very good way to get into music theory. Over time, you break that down into its smallest components. But in the meantime, you start with the large stuff right there. Now, how do I know this? How have I come to this conclusion? Well, for starters, I have a degree in music theory from the Hart School of Music, which was a classical conservatory. I then studied music theory again when I went to Berklee College of Music to study film scoring. Okay, so I know a lot of music theory, and I can tell you that it's taught wrong for the average student. It's taught backwards. So I get it. If you feel that music theory is boring, I can understand why. Teachers, if you can't figure out a creative way to teach it, again, I can understand why. I'm assuming that because you're a teacher, you at least know some theory, like I said before. But if the only way you know to present it is the way your teacher presented it, and they presented it with the tiny things of knowing the notes and then knowing the durations and then learning your scales and learning how to build chords, if you learned it from that way, sure, it's probably going to sound a little boring. It's probably going to feel a little boring. Now, I've been teaching since 2007. I can tell you that all of my students have learned music theory, and none of them, at least to the best of my knowledge, have found it boring. Because I teach it the other way around. I teach it from the broad strokes and then break it down from there. I use their own music to teach these theory concepts. So it's not always linear because of the songs that they want to learn, but they get all of it by the time they finish with a course of lessons. They understand what's going on in the music that they are listening to. So to you teachers out there, stop perpetuating the joke. Of all of the musicians that I have met over the years in my travels, guitar players are so adamantly against learning music theory, more so than any other musician I've ever met. Why? I personally believe that we instructors are the problem. Most of us are telling our students that theory is boring and that we don't need to learn it. Sure, there are situations where you might not use it, but stop perpetuating the joke, okay? I don't mind laughing at myself. Yeah, there was a time I didn't know how to read music either. I was an example of that joke, okay? I can laugh at myself. People can laugh at me, and I will laugh with them. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But stop perpetuating this joke. If you don't want to teach music theory, that's fine. Don't. If you do want to learn how to teach music theory and you want to know how to do it in a way that's going to get your students engaged, leave me a comment below. We'll hook up and I will share with you my secrets. Now, to you students out there, I urge you, open your mind to the possibility of learning music theory. I promise you, not only is it not boring, it is one of the coolest aspects of learning how to play an instrument, is learning how the music you're learning, how it all works. That is one of the coolest things about learning how to play, is getting inside music. And you can go as shallow or as deep as you want in terms of the learning, but all you need to learn are a few basic concepts about a few basic constructs in music, and you are off to the races, right? All of a sudden you can get into a piece of music and you'll know why this piece of music sounds different from this piece of music, and you'll be able to listen to the songs of your favorite artists and determine, wow, hey, that's really cool. They did that in this song, they did something else in this song, and it sounds really cool. You'll be able to compare the music of two different artists and know why they are different and why they are still both cool. All right, that's what music theory does. It answers the question, why is this music so cool? So I'm gonna stop rambling. That's my rant. Again, teachers, please stop perpetuating the idea that music theory is boring, and students, please open your mind to the possibility of learning it, because I promise you, when you get these basic concepts of music and you start listening to music with this in mind, your whole world is going to open up. This understanding of music is going to be so awesome, you're going to wonder how you ever played guitar without it. So anyway, that's my rant. Thank you very much for listening. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you very much. I'm eternally grateful. Let's start a discussion about this, please. Teachers, students, everybody, leave me comments below. I will answer all of them as quickly as I can. In the meantime, I have been Kevin O'Shaughnessy. You have been awesome. Don't forget that. And I will talk to you real soon.